I was reading through Nahum and this thing popped into my head. I'm going to dig in a little bit deeper. I went into it in the chapter 2 video, I think. But it's this idea of God's compassion is that he makes people aware of the standard, that he goes out of his way to give us certain things to let us know the standard. Some of the things that he gives us, we'll go into in a second, but the law, examples of judgment, prophetic words that speak to us. But here's the story that kind of sets this up. As I was going through this, I was like, well, he's telling Nineveh what they did wrong. And I thought, when I was doing jiu-jitsu, if somebody choked me out or I got into a bad spot, I didn't know why I lost. I didn't know what I did wrong. And it gets frustrating because you're learning literally as people are choking you or trying to break your arms off. That's how it goes. They're trying to snap your limbs, or joints. They're trying to break you, and you have to tap. And it's very humiliating at first because, well, not humiliating, humbling. It can be humiliating sometimes, but it's very humbling. You go through this process, and the most frustrating thing about it is when you don't know what's wrong. But once you start learning what you're doing wrong, then you start getting better. Then you recognize the pattern. Then you go, oh, that's what I was doing. I was getting angry. I was blaming God, even though I'm responsible for this. I'm not thanking God for the circumstances around this problem. What I'm doing, I'm looking directly at this and blaming God for it. That's a problem. Or I'm getting angry about it instead of doing what I could do about it. These are all problems. And once you start recognizing the pattern, you can make it better. Or think of a broken relationship with anybody. And God is a relational God, and we have relationships with other believers. And we're called to be different in those relationships. One thing that we're called to do in Matthew, when Jesus is talking about how to deal with problems, he says, look, go to somebody, confront them directly. Right? When Paul is talking about how to confront believers about issues in the church, you go to them directly and address it. You don't beat around the bush. This is about relationships. And you let them know what they did wrong. God is being an example of that here. Every time he gives an example of repent, he's giving examples of what the sin or offense is. It's idolatry. It's violence. It's whatever it is. He's giving examples. And so he's actually letting us know how we're failing. This ties directly into one of the main reasons that God gave us the law, which is to show us how far short of the standard we fall, so that we can just give up any pretense and depend on him. And as Nahum shows us over and over again, the judgment is coming. The judgment is coming very soon. The day of the Lord, that day when we will be judged and found wanting, is coming. There's no escaping it. And a lot of the other prophets, Nahum's actually a great example of this. Other prophets talk a lot more about God's chosen people. So if you consider yourself a Christian, you would be on the inside track. Well, you don't get down either. In fact, the harshest punishments are for the Pharisaical people, the religious people that get it wrong. Because they knew the standard, even better than non-believers who don't know their right from their left. So this idea, the law, is given as a way to show us the standard. That is an act of compassion in and of itself. Then you have examples of judgment like this, of the Assyrians, of the different punishments that Israel and Judah had, the ways in which God took the nation of Israel and showed the national sins that they were committing, and what happens to nations that turn away from God. The prophetic words that speak to us. Prophecy and prophetic words are an interesting thing because the law is the law. The law has always been since creation. The minute God spoke the first words, let there be light, the law was in existence. It was imbued into creation. And this idea that the standards and the laws have always been around in God's created order. It's built into God's created order. The law just expounds on why God's created order is the standard and shows us concrete examples of that. The prophetic words that come after that are direct applications to individual sins. And so that's one thing I see pastors today really, I really wish that they would do more of. There are a handful of amazing pastors out there that are directly applying the principles in concrete ways for people to live out now. There's a reason that people are sheep in the Bible. It's because not everybody has this gift. I don't have it. It's very difficult for me. Now, when somebody else points it out, I go, oh my gosh, I see it now. But it's very hard for me to make any kind of connections with the Bible, biblical theology, and all these things to our greater culture as it is today. And so it takes this greater awareness. But this is a compassion that God gives us. And so as we look at this idea that how do we know what the standard is and why we're losing? How do we get better? How are we sanctified? Well, God gave us multiple tools. He gave us the law. He gave us examples of what's going to happen, of concrete examples of the type of discipline and punishment that he uses to bring people to him. And then he uses prophetic words that directly take those standards and apply it to the world so that we as believers can see when we're not being humble. We can start to see the patterns of idolatry in our lives. We can start to see the patterns of letting these other things sneak in the side door, and we can start to identify them and stop doing them. We can start to give those things over to God. One of the things that I really struggled with was like just getting mad about stupid stuff, like somebody cutting me off at traffic or the dog or whatever it was. Like I'd get home and the dog would chew something up and I'd get mad. I couldn't do anything about that on my own. But the minute that I just said, yeah, I'm angry, and then I gave it to God, I couldn't believe the amazing changes that started happening with my attitude, and it's just amazing. The most compassionate thing, I think, the most practical compassionate thing that I've noticed in my life is this idea that the compassion really is in the recognition of this and giving those things over to God. It's kind of difficult to explain, I guess. But let me know in the comments below. Let me know if that makes sense or not. But I really was struck that it's a compassionate thing for God to show us the standard. And on the flip side of that, Satan, he tries to hide the standard. Like he's a deceiver for a reason. He's trying to deceive us into blaming God for our problems, blaming other things, not taking responsibility. These are all deceptions. So I just thought that was such a huge, compassionate thing that God does for us. So that's what I had for this one. Let me know in the comments what you thought about that. Like and subscribe to catch all these as they come out. I'm about to die from coughing, I think. So I will catch you in the next video. Peace.